What
Yeah.
test can I do? Only the test I had already taken.
Right.
Did the glymphatic system start to work again? The only way to tell was if in the bloodstream, the ratios changed. Again, an impossible feat. I called my doctor. They said, no, I won't redo the test because it doesn't get better. And I don't want the insurance company beating on me for doing a
Oh,
test that
wow.
is no point in doing it. Went to my other doctor. Nope, won't do it. Called 10 doctors, online doctors.
Yep.
Finally got one. That
Oh,
was
you
brave
did?
enough. Let's do
Right.
it. Because something happened here. I got
Right.
better. I went from stage 3 Parkinson's to stage 1. Alzheimer's
Right.
disappeared.
Welcome back to the Green Living Now podcast. I'm Amy Hartshorn. Here we talk about how to live healthier in a world full of hidden toxins and mixed messages without fear or overwhelm. Before we jump in, if you want more guests like today's guest with real stories, real questions, and practical takeaways, click subscribe. It helps this show grow so I can bring these kinds of conversations. Today's episode is intense, and it's one man's lived experience, not medical advice, but it's a powerful story about toxic exposure, a diagnosis that escalated fast, and what happened when he refused to take no for an answer. Let's dive in. Welcome, Mark.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, your story is both painful and unique. And
Right.
I think it's an important one for people to hear.
Yes.
Why don't you start from the beginning? What happened to you and how did you get to
Well,
where you are today?
in my case, the beginning was truly the beginning. My mom and dad were stationed on Camp Lejeune base in January of 1958. And that base later on became the most contaminated base in U.S. history. It was contaminated with multiple chemicals, one of them being TC, which was pretty huge, but also benzene and a host of other things that had gotten into the water through different ways. Since my mom got pregnant right after getting to that base, essentially she was drinking the base water. And so I was getting it in utero for 9 months, but she had a horrible second and third trimester, almost losing me a number of times. And she didn't know at the time, but this was actually going on quite a bit. And I'll get into that a little later, what they found out. When I was eventually born, and the doctors weren't sure if I was going to make it because they'd lost some other babies during that time period and had birth defects and things of that order. I made it, but they blamed my mom. They said, oh, you have toxemia, with something toxic in the blood, but they didn't define it. And they probably didn't know, the doctors themselves.
They probably wouldn't have guessed that she was essentially being poisoned from the drinking water and whatever
No,
else.
exactly. And this can be taking a shower. It becomes an aerosol. There are
Of
all these
course.
things that the base is dealing with that are in fact problems.
And even absorbing it through the skin can sometimes be even worse, I've heard, than drinking the tainted water.
Yes, that is correct. And again, you think about Marines, they're going out in the field and working and coming back and taking a shower every day. In addition, they had a thing they called the water buffalo. The water buffalo was a truck with a giant tank on it. It got nicknamed the water buffalo. And part of the whole lawsuit and everything going on with Camp Lejeune is saying those water buffaloes were filled with water directly out of like fire hydrants and put out there for the people to drink. So they were exposed to
Wow.
it.
And what was the reason why they were doing that as opposed to just, oops, you
Yeah,
switched?
sorry about that. Yeah, somebody clicked in and it switched. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. So they were delivering water for what reason? Because it was also coming out of the tap.
Yes, definitely the tap. As a matter of fact, the government tried to say that only if you drank from the tap water. Their legal battle was you had to drink, but how do you prove you drink from the faucet? Okay. Or lawsuits and everything going on in Camp Lejeune, which you've probably heard about in Google and things like that.
Sure.
There's a lot. They were expecting 1 million people to be involved in these lawsuits. There are 409,000 actually registered. So I'm one of the 409,000, my mom and myself. She passed away. I'm representing her estate. What the lawyers are saying in their test, and actually the government's own test, which they hired the government essentially to do, And the government came out and did all the research and said, yeah, it was everywhere. It was all over the place. It also had a steam plant. And this was the part I thought horrible because I did a lot of research into the newspaper of Camp Lejeune, did all the history. And what was wild about it was that they had steam plants that put heat into the base. Makes sense. Okay. Now there's 51 miles, I think, of steam pipes, but they also used it to cook all the food in the mess hall, the same pipes.
Oh, my word.
Yes.
So the people that were cooking, for example, or folks that were living there, they probably didn't know about any of this, right?
No.
And what is the essence of the lawsuit? Like the culpability of the government for not knowing or for knowing and not doing anything? Or what exactly is the suit
Because
focused
no
on?
cases yet have gone to trial, amazingly enough. Exactly. No, they've been fighting it back, trying to pull everything they can to avoid it. The government has also offered some people settlements, but the
Oh,
lawyers, of course, are saying, don't go for those. Those are, if you will, the low hanging fruit. And yeah, you might be able to go out and buy a car, but
right.
what's the point of that?
Exactly.
I have Parkinson's from there. It's what they call a tier 1 disease. So it is in the highest level of that, but they have not decided yet the dollar amounts. Now, Bloomberg Law did post and said that they thought the settlements would reach $21 billion in total. So,
Wow.
and that was a while ago.
So let's rewind a little bit. So when did you
Sure.
start having health problems?
Yeah. The problem is when you don't know that happens and the government hides it from everybody. When you go to the doctor and you say, I'm having some nerve issues or I'm having
Mhm.
some problems or something like that, they're just like, oh, well, that could be normal or whatever. But
Sure.
one of the bizarre things I had were problems with my teeth. They were highly sensitive, even when I was young. So by
Oh,
the time I was like 32, something like that, I had root canals in every tooth I had. Every dentist that ever saw me said, I've never seen anyone in my life with this many root
right.
canals.
Oh my gosh. And
And
I've heard there's some issues with root canals
they're not a good idea in the long run. But at the time, I didn't have much of
that
a
helped
choice.
you.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
pain was too much and I would get it and had to deal with it. But also I had other nerve issues and things like that that were going on, more male related type of nerve issues, if you
Mm,
will. And no doctor could figure it out. And it just went on and on. And it wasn't really only until I learned about the Camp Lejeune things coming forward
yeah.
that I started to realize that might be an issue. But it was actually one of my doctors who knew I had some nerve issues who said, and wrote in the medical records, this came from early chemical contamination.
Wow.
So
So
that was
he
pretty
knew.
powerful statement that person put in there.
So when you mentioned that the doctors weren't even sure if you were going to be born, were those issues, I'm imagining, were related to the chemical toxicity and
Yes.
exposure? And
Well,
so,
yeah. Yeah. And what happened? There's two elements. I believe it was, I want to say it's ABC News. It's up on our website, mybrainrestore.com. If people click on my journey, there's a link to a YouTube video which documented the Camp Lejeune case. But more
okay.
interesting, what they concentrated is how many babies were born. And this was later in, I think, the 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
They focused in that area because it was still contaminated.
Gosh.
It was
So
40 years, 40 years of contamination, if you can imagine.
to believe.
Yeah, but what happened was the doctors were getting babies that were born so disformed. And this is what the documentary worked on. And it was so bad they had to take up a collection to bury the children, the babies
Oh,
born at Camp Lejeune because there wasn't enough
oh my
to take care
word.
of it. And that's actually got a whole part of that report. And the women they interviewed, again, were like in the 70s or 80s. They were using a chemical called TCE, which was in the water, but they were actually using it to clean guns and clean machinery. And that was a woman's division, if you will, to clean all these things.
Oh my
And had
gosh.
no masks, no gloves, or
So totally
anything.
direct exposure through skin inhalation. Oh my word. I'm
And yeah,
amazed any
it
babies
was,
were born at all,
well,
much less healthy.
watching the documentaries is hard to watch because all
I
these
bet.
women were like, my children had birth defects or born stillborn or all these
Mhm.
kind of things. They said all of us within that division that was doing that, everyone had problems when they were trying to bear children.
Yeah.
That was huge. And it points out how bad it was. And it also points out how much the government covered it up. And even some commanders that came in even put out a flyer that pretty much everyone just laughed at. Yeah, really? It was like, there's no problem. Everything's clean. It's all fine. It took them years to actually close the wells down that they were pulling from. They do know that the TCE, some of it that got in the water came from a dry cleaner, which Marines need to clean their uniforms constantly. Okay.
Yeah.
And they were literally using that to dump the TCE down into the sewer system. And when it went in the sewer system, it was upstream, if you will, or up aquifer from Camp Lejeune.
Oh.
And I had read in the paper in Camp Lejeune, actually, I went through all the archives. I got all the archives and actually built a site called chemicalcasualties.com. Chemicalcasualties.com was a way you could put in your last name and basically it would pop up and say, I do see Sergeant whatever on the base. He's mentioned in the paper. Maybe we got a gun award or something like that. So we have 600,000 names that are in the database because not everybody can prove they were on the base. A lot of records were destroyed in 1971 in a fire. So when they go to get the archives to get that, sorry, I don't show that you were on the base. Prove you're on the base.
Oh my God.
So there's a game going on.
Yeah. So did you not have a sickly childhood as a result?
No, actually, I had some things that were there, but they were mainly considered normal growth problems. They probably weren't, but my mom dealt with them and dealt with them with the doctors or would go outside of the base to deal with other doctors and stuff. So actually, I grew up pretty well. It was only later that Parkinson started to show its ugly face and started to do things. And unfortunately, this was right during COVID. So the last thing you want to do is go to a doctor in a waiting room.
Jeez.
Wasn't high on my list.
Yeah. Understandable.
So you dealt with it.
Yeah.
They've already picked what they call 5 bellwethers. These will be 5 people with Parkinson's that will go through the court system first. They're supposed to start doing this by next month. And once those decisions are made, they will set the tone for all the other settlements that'll be going on.
Okay.
So that's where they're going.
Wow. Okay. So you start to discover in COVID that you're having symptoms of
But
Parkinson's.
something in the thing, dragging my right foot. I'm on the computer a lot. So for me, my pinky was shaking a lot. I had things that I didn't know were Parkinson's. I knew something was going on. I hadn't quite figured it out. And when I did get to my general practitioner, he said, you either have MS or Parkinson's. I'm not really sure. Let me send you to a neurologist. And the neurologist pretty quickly, through just clinical work, said, yeah, you have Parkinson's. And it's probably a little more advanced than you might think. So I said, okay. And eventually, as it progressed, I got to stage 3 Parkinson's. So that was pretty close to using a walker.
And that was in a short amount of time because we're only 2025 here.
No, this was actually when I got older. The Parkinson's wasn't diagnosed until the COVID time. I'm 67 now.
But I'm saying in the last 5 years, you went from level 3 or stage 3 to now having reversed
stage 1 at best.
Stage 1, which is incredible. So yeah, we got to get into how you got to that place.
Yeah. But what was interesting, I got so well in 6 months of taking what we'll talk about, a natural ingredient. I ran in the Michael J. Fox Marathon in DC. And got a medal at the end. I didn't even know that was going to happen. It's like, dude, you made it. Most people run for people with Parkinson's.
And it was how many miles?
I think that was a 2-mile run, something like that. Yeah.
Still, any distance is incredible. Okay.
Yeah. Walking downstairs usually meant falling down.
So trying to run would have been inconceivable. So you get the diagnosis from the doctor, and then what happens?
I got the diagnosis, but I'm the kind of person who doesn't sit still for certain things. And when I got that diagnosis clinically, I said, number one, I'm in a lawsuit, so I don't want to be beat up by some lawyer who says, oh, clinically, maybe that doesn't mean anything. And I asked to get further testing. They wanted me to get a DAT scan, which is a MRI scan that looks for dopamine basically in the brain and the cells that make it. But it's only, according to the Michael J. Fox Foundation, it's only 85% accurate. And I had found a test that does a biopsy, which is pretty painless, actually. They just take a small part of the skin, a little circle part, and they take it in 3 spots, and they can actually see the Parkinson's misfolded tendrils, which is wow.
Yeah.
And it was like 95% accurate. So
Wow.
I asked my neurologist, and this is where we get into, I'm not always a fan of doctors. I said, this is SYN-1 test is what it's called.
Yep.
And this test was new, but not that new. Okay. And I asked my doctor, could I get that? And they're like, oh, I don't know what that is. No, I'm not ordering it. I went to my skin doctor and they said, never heard of it. Not going to order it. So again, I'm not one who sits still. I called the lab that made it.
Oh,
And I
wow.
spoke to somebody and I said, look, I want to get this test. My doctors are fighting back.
Yeah.
And they said, your doctor has to order it and blah, blah, blah. But I said, don't you have an exam kit that you send out free to the doctor? Because you're trying to make the money on the back end. And they said, yeah. I said, send it to them. And they said,
Wow.
we've never been asked to do that. I said, you got a problem with it?
Always a first
You know
time for
what?
everything.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
I
Okay.
just said, okay, we'll send it. So they
Okay.
sent it to my skin doctor. My skin doctor gets it, calls me up immediately and says, what is this? And they said, we haven't talked to your neurologist. I don't think your neurologist wants to do this. And I said, let's all meet. I don't mind. Let's do it. So I went to the skin doctor, got the neurologist on the phone. We got in a good argument. Okay. But I said, look, the test is right here. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And everyone said, okay, sure. He's not going to leave.
Right. Give him what he wants.
Give him what he wants. Nothing's going to happen. We don't care kind of attitude. But they did it. There was literally one nurse reading the paper how to do it while the doctor was trying to follow it. And they'd never done it.
Okay.
And when it came back, and it was covered by Medicare, which astounded me. So it's
That's
covered by
amazing.
Medicare. Why would the doctors not know it? But they said, no, it's covered. It came back 100%. Okay.
So no
And
question that you had.
no question. And actually on my
Parkinson's.
site under My Journey, My Brain Restore, if you go to My Journey on the site, I post my medical records. Okay. I'm not shy. So
Okay.
I'll put it up there and it actually shows what Parkinson's look like. The face of Parkinson's is right there.
Wow.
And it's a stained slide where they take it and stain it and they can see the misfolded tendrils, which get in your brain and essentially wrap themselves around what produces the dopamine and kill it or destroy it or prevent it from working.
So
So
this is something that's in your skin.
it's probably in the fat layers, which is
Okay.
under the skin, but it's very small biopsy that they do. It's pretty painless,
Oh,
actually.
good. Okay.
So the test wasn't hard to do. But what was frightening to me in some ways, both the skin doctor and the neurologist after the test came back said, oh, this is fantastic. We'll start using it as a what?
Oh my gosh.
Really?
Wow.
Guys?
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Shouldn't that
I'm
be an
glad
inside
not.
thought instead of sharing it with you? Okay.
Exactly. Did I
Okay.
get paid for that? Today's visit's free. So now that I had a more positive thing that I understood a little bit better, which put me in a better legal position to battle, which was part of the
Yes.
main point, but it also gave me incentive because the doctor just put me on one of the L-DOPA type drugs, which I learned pretty quickly has what doctors call in the background a honeymoon effect. And that just means after about 5 years of taking it, it ain't going to work anymore. So it's a short-term solution because the analogy would be insulin. If you're taking insulin as an example, you're simply replacing something the pancreas should make. And if you take Ozempic, basically you're waking the pancreas back up. You're telling it to get to work. You can't take insulin at the same time. Eventually, you start to get too much.
Oh, okay.
So that becomes a problem. And
Yeah.
your blood sugars will drop too far. And so I was familiar with that. And that was the best analogy I could make in that particular way. So what really happened was I wasn't really happy with the routine of this honeymoon effect, this idea that what I'm going to be taking is going to wear off and it's only a stopgap because what's happening is in the brain, you're continuing to lose those cells. So what happens, from what I understand, once you lose about 50% of those cells, you start to see the effects of Parkinson. When you take synthetic dopamine, L-DOPA, those brain cells are still dying. And
Oh,
so
okay.
essentially you get a lower percentage. So let's just say
Yeah.
it's 25% now. Now you have to increase that dosage, but then you get side effects from it that are horrendous. because
Oh,
the body would normally regulate that every 30 seconds. It would take
yeah.
care of itself and it would flush itself out of those amyloid plaques and tau plaques and all these kind of things that form.
Okay.
So
Wait, so the amyloid plaque formation is part of Parkinson's?
amyloid is more associated with Alzheimer's, but all those things, and I'll explain this in a minute, happen together. They seem to be controlled
Oh,
by the same system,
okay.
which is called the glymphatic system. Now, you probably haven't heard of that because it was only discovered in 2012 and then
Oh my God.
rediscovered in 2025 in May. There's an article out about where they found it in other animals.
Huh.
And this system is like the lymphatic system, but it
Right.
is a unique system that clears out those type of products out of the brain and move them into the bloodstream. And that's why you see the amyloid beta 4240 test, which is used for Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
When it goes down, I was told by every doctor, and if you Google that, you will see that it cannot be reversed. Once it goes in that direction, it is unstoppable.
So you mean once you start building up the amyloid plaque, you can't stop it?
No, basically, the blood is always going to show and get worse, or it's going to level off, and you're going to see that ratio mismatch. And another nickname for this is the dishwasher of the brain, another coined term that I've heard, where it essentially helps the body clear that. All these things are stuck in the brain, if you will,
Okay.
for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia. They're all stuck in the same place because of the same system failing. But since it's such a new system, I found that doctors were like, what? I'm like, here, look at Google it.
My
Come on,
gosh.
take 3 seconds, okay? And so they don't focus on it. However, pharmaceuticals have started to focus on it.
Okay.
How do we address that? And they're looking at repurposing cancer drugs to redo it. But those are drugs that end in NAB, okay? And unfortunately, those have a huge amount of side effects.
Mhm.
And you're talking about 3 years of infusions, 100,000 for the medicine right
Oh my
now.
word.
You have to do MRIs constantly, and you have to go to the hospital or a facility to do the infusion. So you're talking about $250,000 to do that. And number one, I didn't want to go through all those type of things to
Absolutely.
try to do that. Plus, the side effects were as long as your arm. They always had the one where it says "and death." Yeah, I always like that one. I already have that in my vision here. So
Exactly. We're trying to
And
avoid that.
I'm trying to avoid it. So I really went out and did a lot of research because in the past I was studying to be a veterinarian was my main thing. So I was in the medicine. I worked at an animal hospital. I helped with surgery. I
Oh
was on the
wow.
microscope a lot. I had studied a lot of biology, but in school, computers came around. I had an opportunity to hook up to the University of Maryland's mainframe from a terminal where I literally put a phone and you dial it, you hear the noise, and
Oh my gosh.
that's how old it was.
Yeah.
And I liked programming and developing, and I found that to be quite unique. Working from
Huh.
a blank screen, how do you build something? You have to envision in your mind. The combination of those two things, that biology background and building from blank screens, made me do a lot of research. And where I found the University of Japan was actually experimenting on a natural product, a fruit, which is actually called Zizifa is its name, which I had never heard of ever in my life.
Goodbye.
And when they experimented with it multiple ways, trying to make it into a hot tea, trying to make it into an extract where you use an alcohol base and you try to
Yep.
extract it, using the residue of that. They could not get these mice that had Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and dementia with Lewy bodies. Okay. They couldn't cure that. Then they decided, what if we grind it in a certain way, that seed, to make it like into a flour and give it to the mice? Would that work? Something must have tripped in their minds to say, why not treat it naturally and treat it in this way? And
So
it worked. It cured
that,
100% of
that's
all
wild.
3 neurological diseases.
How did they even know to look to that fruit?
That they didn't write down in their journal.
Huh?
And it was not native to Japan.
Yeah, I think I remember reading your profile. It said it comes from China.
It comes from China. Yeah. But there are 120 subspecies of that. There's a big one in India. The United States also grows it in California.
Called here in the US.
Still ZZ Farm. Sometimes Juby is another name that they call it.
Huh.
but it's not grown in huge quantities here, and they're all hybrids. Now, the
Not the
problem
original.
is, as explained by them, the hybrids are completely different seeds, if it bears the seed at all, because it's a
Okay.
hybrid.
Can't use any of the other hybrid versions because it's not the original, and that's the seed is what you're after.
And the analogy would be if I said the Granny Smith apple will keep the doctor away, and that's the only one that would work. And I surprised you by saying and this is true, there are 7,500 varieties of apples, and
That's
only
mind-boggling.
one works. This is the same thing. They locked in on one cultivator and they
Right.
stayed with that cultivator, realizing all the others were hybrid to make them sweeter, to make them bigger. And of course, that changed their makeup. And they also realized that heating it was a real bad thing to do.
Yeah.
And yet in China, they had used it as a hot tea for a number of years. But again, they heated it. So they never
Right.
noticed any neurological effects from it at all.
Okay, so you found out about this research, and then you decided, "I have to get this stuff."
Yeah, number one, yeah. But the interesting thing about the research was they were trying to make a synthetic drug out of it. They
Right.
were trying to isolate. They were trying to steal from nature, if you will. And
Like, you can't patent something from nature, you have to tweak it to make it something synthetic about it, being able to patent it.
ex- right.
Okay.
And so they didn't succeed. They thought they isolated it. And even in the scientific report, they said, oh, we think we got it isolated. They gave it to the mice. It didn't cure them. So in the end, they abandoned the research because they just simply could not figure out how to make it into a $10,000 a month drug. For me, I'm the kind of person who goes, why don't I just stick with the mice stuff? That's the key. And also, how do I keep it cold and improve upon how it's made? Because they said heat was the destroyer. Heat caused the problem. And so
Right.
they did a process called cold milling, but cold milling can still get up to 120 degrees in the mill.
Oh.
So I came up with a process called ultra chill mill, which we trademarked.
It's
And I decided how to chill that mill down, how to do that. And then we use what's called burst milling, which takes longer to make the product. But what we do is we keep that product around 50 degrees in the mill. My solution was, how do I do that? And this was not released to the public. I became the next mouse. That's the way I
Right.
looked at it.
Let me just ask you something, though. So you had
Yep.
to source this fruit from China?
Yes. Yeah.
And so you found a distributor.
Distributors. Yeah. We
Oh,
made friends
multiple,
with a
okay.
few distributors because we knew that it might be hard getting it or whatever
Yeah.
at certain times. It's a bit seasonal, so that's a
Oh.
factor, but it stores for a long time in its original seed form. Now,
Mhm.
they sometimes grind it and sometimes you can find it on certain sites. And it's weird. I just spoke last night to one of my people who buys the product from me. And she said, I saw it and I bought it up there and I got the powder. And it was from China. And I looked at it and I kept looking at it for a month. And I said, I'm too scared to take that. I have no idea what's in it.
I can understand the concern. And
So
also, if
it,
somebody else is processing it, they're probably not using the same kind of chill mill
oh,
method that you've developed, and
not at all.
most likely not going to be as viable or useful.
Seeds have oils in them and other components. And considering the fact that the scientists themselves, when they tried to extract it or do certain things, it always destroyed it.
Oh,
And in a sense, they said, without saying it, basically by us modifying it or trying to do it in any other form, we were destroying the element that would make it
right.
work. And an
That's
interesting example of that, my son is allergic to apples, which is a strange
oh my
allergy.
goodness.
He's also allergic to birch tree dust or pollen, which are the leaves. And a doctor told me birch trees and apples, there's a connection between the two.
Really?
And so his lips will swell or whatever. But if you cook that apple, if you go get an apple pie
Yeah.
or
Or applesauce.
or apple cider or something, doesn't
Yeah.
affect him in any way.
That's incredible. Okay.
So again, cooking it or processing it created a problem where nature's own way of doing it.
Inherent beauty of nature is just astounding to me. Okay.
Yeah. So I just said, let's do what nature does and already gave us.
Correct.
But we have to respect nature in the sense that it doesn't want to be heated. That's not what it wants. It wants to stay in its natural form. But I also had to make it and mill it down small enough and powder form so that it would mix with yogurt and pudding. In other words, cold items. shakes, things like that. So it became like a protein shake, but because of its properties, it doesn't clump like a protein shake. So it mixes very readily in with the yogurt. And I invited some nurses over I knew, and I said, here, guys, I'm going to make some of this. Tell me what you say. And they're like, I don't taste it at all.
Oh, so it
And I'm
doesn't
like,
even have a flavor particularly
well, of course, they had to dip their finger in the jar.
in the powder.
They just had to go for it. And they
Sure.
said, it tastes earthy. It's bad. Oh,
Huh.
it tastes
Okay.
good. And then we put in a 1% amount of it's actually a seaweed, which interesting enough, the scientists had mentioned other supplements that may help cut down on inflammation. Because
Oh,
when this works, it seems that essentially it's breaking down that glymphatic system and getting it to function again seems to be what's happening. Now, the scientists never did the amyloid beta 4240 test, which shows the ratio of that in the bloodstream. And again, I'll point out it cannot be reversed according to doctors and Google. No one on the planet has ever done that. However, I said, wait a minute. If I'm getting better and my Alzheimer's was gone, I had a lot of scares there, and I'll explain that in a minute. But to stay on this path, I looked at it and I said, what is going on here that's going to allow me to back up just like I did with my Parkinson's?
and what I'm hearing you say is that they're not doing the test a second time anyway. So even if somebody was improving, they wouldn't have the results to show.
No.
Okay.
But what would show is that they got better. Their Alzheimer's started to go away. Their Parkinson's
Exactly.
started away. So
Exactly. So
going more on the clinical side.
correct. So one thing I'm curious about is how much did you take and how much did you even know to take? And
Yeah, it's
how
pretty
did you
hard.
figure that out?
It's pretty hard. They had the amount they gave the mice, which was hard mathematically to figure out.
Exactly.
So 6 months before I actually release the product, I'm the kind of person I have to prove it works first. Being a
I
database
totally get
programmer,
that.
you test your own work. You try to blow it up. You do stupid things to it. You try to break it as much as you can.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the same theory. I had to figure out what dose works. Do I have a problem here?
That's too much or too
Right.
little. Okay.
Yeah. And I figured out that point. We actually came out with what I would call a preventive version, which was designed for people predisposed, family members that may have had it. And there's a 15% chance of getting things like Parkinson's as an example of other family members have it. There's a gene situation that can trigger. So people want preventives. We now have a preventive. And they used this in the mice also. And they figured it also was a preventive because they were able to take normal mice that had no issues and improve their memory by 20%. So that in itself was pretty amazing. Even they were amazed at that. But they were getting 100% improvement across 3 neurological diseases with this, which to me was that aha moment when you go, wow, what literally cures in mice, and I can't say cures in humans for the FDA, cures in mice 100%. Drug companies make drugs based on 35% improvement, 100% improvement, and across 3 different diseases. So it meant to me that
What's the third one? We've got Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and
dementia.
okay. So dementia, is dementia the one that's one of the Alzheimer's, or is Alzheimer's under the dementia umbrella? I always forget that.
No problem. Alzheimer's is under dementia.
Okay.
60% of the people who get Alzheimer's essentially have dementia, but it's a subset of that dementia. and it's
Gotcha.
called
Okay. So it's a
Alzheimer's.
subset of dementia. Okay.
Yeah.
My dad actually
Alzheimer's.
died. My dad
Absolutely.
actually died of dementia,
Okay. Yeah.
as did both of his parents.
Yeah. Okay. So essentially, that's a point where people would want to take it as a preventive.
Right.
Because the whole idea is to keep that glymphatic system functioning, keeping it working. And again, I had to put together something that scientists didn't do. They never took that test, that amyloid test, to the mice. They just dissected them. That was easier for them to do and look under a microscope and say, hey, all these tendrils are gone. The cells are starting to produce things. They're free. Where did it go? The only system that cleans it out is the newly discovered system in 2012, which most doctors don't even know what it is. And that had to be the key. The blood test became, to me, the Rosetta Stone, if you will, looking at those different elements that were coming in different languages, if you will, and putting it together so that humans could test it. It would
Right.
have a milestone point where I had already taken this test and told by everyone, forget retaking it. But that wasn't good enough for me. I had to understand why it was getting
Yeah.
better. What was improving? This all made sense to me. And I think it makes sense to anyone listening that, okay, something got better that shouldn't have. And clinically, I improved. And I actually went to my neurologist and said, I'm taking this other supplement. And how am I doing? I said, your tremors went away. I don't see any tremors on you at all.
Wow.
And she goes, just continue taking what you're taking. And you don't want to take what I'm giving you. Don't worry about it
Yeah.
because obviously it's doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And I don't recommend anyone instantly stopping taking anything their doctor gives them.
Right.
But for me, what you have to be cautious about, if your brain starts producing dopamine on its own and this system cleans out, as I've already proven that it's cleaning out, then that means your natural system will come back on board. And if it does, and you're taking L-Dopa at the same time, you're doing the same problem as taking insulin along with those.
When you don't need it.
Yeah, and you'll crash. Your blood sugars will drop down. Most doctors don't tell people to stop taking the insulin. And okay, your body's now producing its own, taking care of itself. You're only confusing it. So
Right.
I try to put it in our health thing, wean people off that. And the doctors should understand that. But getting doctors to understand that, to learn something new, is a difficult task. And
Yeah.
if they want to
Especially if
go,
it's outside of their medical training, which a lot of these alternative things are. I have been meeting some doctors who were conventionally trained who have then
Mhm.
off to pursue
Right,
these alternative, more holistic strategies, which is awesome. So,
right.
all right. So you tried this out for 6 months on yourself. And then
Yeah.
with your success, you felt confident to share this with others, I'm guessing.
Yeah, what
And how it
happened
works.
was actually June was the time in the Michael J. Fox Marathon in Washington,
Oh, yes.
D.C.
Yes.
And so going back to that, I signed myself up for it. My wife, who's 15 years younger than me, said, you're nuts. You're going to fall down and break your neck. And I
But
said, you
she
know
hadn't
what?
seen the improvement yet?
Improvement sometimes, I got to tell you, when you have Alzheimer's and you have Parkinson's, you try to hide it as best you
Oh,
can. A lot of people are shy about it. And so you feel uncomfortable being around people. You disappear.
yeah.
And that's something I didn't want to do. Number one, my wife was aware of it. She had come in one time when I lost control of balance and fell down and hit the metal part of the shower, actually, and knocked myself
Oh,
completely out. I was on the ground, unconscious when she
oh
came in. And she
dear.
kept trying to get me up. When I woke up, I said, no, just leave me on the ground because I'm just going to fall again. And I knew I was bleeding. And I'd hit the back of my head. And of course, I made a appointment with the doctor, neurologist right away. And
Oh,
she's like, yeah, you really hit your head pretty hard there. You all right? And she goes, this happens. So you might need to go to a walker or a cane or something. So I was
yeah.
at that stage,
Pretty
but
critical.
I had busted my toes many times. I had actually gone upgraded to steel plated toes for construction workers. And
Gosh.
these stupid shoes that weighed a pound and a half each because I kept hurting myself. But
Yeah.
what I found, and actually it's interesting maybe for your audience who do have Parkinson's, you can buy these things for $36 on Amazon for a pair. And they're steel plated. They show you can drive a car over them and stuff
Oh,
like that.
nice.
But more importantly, they weigh 1.5 pounds each. So when your body goes to lift up that foot, it feels that weight instantly and your body overreacts to pull the foot up further. So it's a little trick that
Yeah.
made me walk better
Oh,
because I was
wow.
lifting more weight per foot than my
Yeah.
body expected. So actually, I was bringing the foot up further than the stair so I'd clear without tripping on it. But I had fallen many times. I obviously couldn't do stuff around the house that I might normally do. Now
Sure.
I jump on a ladder, I clean the gutters.
So back to what used to be normal.
I feel like I'm 30.
No kidding. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So did you give any of this to Michael J. Fox?
I do meet with them. I've met with them at the things. They're all excited about what I'm up to and
Yeah.
doing. I think the Alzheimer's Association actually has been more proactive at giving me their staff cards and say, hey, let us know how it's going and
Yeah.
things of that order. Michael J. Fox just put out a thing where the people that do the SYN-1 test actually are going to do some more trials and stuff like that. So I signed up for that to be part of their program.
Oh,
Now I haven't heard back from them as of this time, but
yeah.
it'd be interesting to see with that further. But there is I guess, and I don't want to say this wrong, I've stumbled on something that people are now buying and using, and people are reporting that it's working for them, that I've
Well,
been
that was
taking
my
the
next
longest.
question.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So you produce this and you sell this
Yeah,
product.
mybrainrestore.com right now, and then we've been approved for Amazon.
Cool.
Yeah, so we had to do some different labeling for them and things like that. The product essentially looks like that.
Well, cool.
Yeah, I know how
And
close I get
how
with it, but I
much
don't know how to focus.
how much of the powder does one take per day? I guess it depends on whether you're doing it preventatively versus trying to.
Yeah. So it's essentially 2 teaspoons. Okay. We have to give a half teaspoon with the product, and preventive can be anywhere from a half teaspoon to a teaspoon.
Okay.
But if it's active, then we recommend that you take 4 scoops of that. Okay. Which is
Ah.
essentially 2 teaspoons every single day. And I've experimented with what we call a 3X, but at that point, you start to get a headache.
Oh,
And we do note a side effect could be a headache and
okay.
something to
That's good
watch
to know.
for, but we haven't had anyone report it. Matter of fact, everyone that I've talked to has reported only side effect you get is gas. Okay, so some
Huh.
flatulence because it's a fiber based. And so
Oh,
you got to look at it like something like Metamucil. Your body has to adjust to that additional fiber intake you're taking every day.
Mark, have you ever thought of going on Shark Tank with this?
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah, no, it's definitely in my thoughts to do that. I think that we wanted to get it on Amazon first. And of course, we are trying to get the word out. And another thing we're really trying to do, it's a little harder. We're trying to get people that can talk to nursing homes about this.
Oh, that would
Because
be incredible.
think about a nursing home that could give a product like this to people. And then all of a sudden, because you don't have enough nurses and caregivers to take care of, you got 10 patients and one nurse between them.
Right.
What if they could get better? What if they could remember certain things and get better like
Exactly.
I did? That helps your whole entire nursing home. Okay.
Yeah.
Completely. And I hope that we can move into that market.
Yeah. I think that would be a totally natural fit. So I'm curious about the varying types of causes for Alzheimer's, dementia, or even Parkinson's. In your case, it was
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
chemical exposure. What are some of the other things that you're finding, or have you been doing research at all to find out what some of the other causes of these diseases have been?
Well, there's a couple different things, but Parkinson's is definitely related a lot to TCE. But
Okay.
most people don't realize they probably have TCE in their garage, brake cleaning fluids, things of that
Oh,
order. Anything that creates grease, not Dawn, but anything that creates grease that's a chemical you spray probably has TCE as
so
its component.
that's such an interesting point because I know a mechanic who I noticed his hand was doing this and he was putting it in his pocket. And I thought, oh gosh, I wonder if all these chemicals have taken some toll.
And he was putting in his pocket because he's embarrassed. The
Exactly.
same thing.
Exactly. I
That's why
knew that. And I,
Parkinson's
of
people
course, was not going
disappear.
to say anything.
That's why Parkinson people disappear into the woodwork. I mean, literally the woodwork of the house. They don't want to go out
Yeah.
and they don't want to stumble. They don't want to trip.
Of course. How
Yeah.
embarrassing. And especially when you're out in public and dangerous,
Right.
potentially.
Oh,
Like
oh,
what you
oh.
experienced falling in your bathroom. Nobody wants to have
Well,
that
and
happen.
I had Alzheimer's also. So the problem with the
Right. So you had a
Alzheimer's,
double whammy.
no, I had 2 of the worst neurological diseases at the same time.
Right.
And I knew I was forgetting things when I went into a room. I'd forget why I went into the room. I forgot where my keys were, the standard things. But the most frightening thing that happened to me was driving home down roads I had driven down for 20 years
Oh no.
and I got lost.
Oh, that was a really clear sign to you.
Scared me to death. And of course, I'm a man, so I'm not going to press the button, take me home, Google. I'm being too much testosterone. You know? And so I basically just kept driving around and hoping I wasn't going to run out of gas. I was like driving and I was like, okay, that road looks familiar. I think I turned left here and I made it back home, but it was like the most scariest event happening to me. And it just drove me further that I can't keep going this way. I joke sometimes and people say you have Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, it's got to be horrible. I said, no, if you fall down, you can't remember you fell down.
until you look at your head and think, oh, where did that blood come from?
Yeah, exactly. You know what ran into me.
Wow.
But again, we have to keep in mind that 13 to 15% of people in the United States are predisposed genetically.
Oh,
That's a pretty
interesting.
high number. So if you have it in the family, like you just mentioned, that
Yeah.
means that you're pretty predisposed. And maybe that only means that glymphatic system is the problem, that the gene, for some reason, it clogs up, it doesn't work. So if you think of a
Yeah.
filter not working, then everything gets stuck behind it. And that's
Yeah.
what's happening in the brain. That's
Yeah.
what's going
I
on.
was just talking to a doctor the other day about the whole epigenetics part of health because I had remembered Dr. Bruce Lipton. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
ever heard of him.
Right.
Yeah, he was the one that first did an experiment with cells in petri dishes, and he had the
Mhm.
three exact same cells in three different petri dishes with three different types of medium in the cell container. And each of those cells, which were identical, created different types of, I don't know, if it eventually would have been body parts perhaps, but
Right.
whatever the case was, each of these identical cells was changed by what medium it was in. And
Right.
so that got him to do a lot of research to realize that he believes that only 10% of diseases are actually inherited through genetics,
Right.
but that the 90% actually has to do with what you're being exposed to, what you're eating, all these different, even stress and all that kind of stuff. And so
Sure.
the doctor that I spoke to the other day was talking about how we all may have these different types of
Mhm.
mental diseases, but it's a matter of whether they get turned off or on.
Right.
And so I'm hoping, and maybe I'll get some of your stuff anyway, but I'm hoping that the type of lifestyle that I've been leading for 30 plus years,
Yeah.
and actually longer than that probably, will protect me from many of the
Mhm.
things that my grandparents and my dad went through. I was thinking about my dad, and we spent a lot of time on golf courses and pesticide
Oh, yeah.
exposure, didn't have the kind of healthy lifestyle that I have. And certainly my grandparents didn't either. Wow. Okay. So anybody that's experiencing these kind of symptoms, is there anything else that you can recommend beyond the supplement, which sounds amazing? Are there first steps that you think people ought to do, or
Right.
just what's your
Well,
advice?
if they have it running in the family, that might be important to
Yeah.
take preventive. Again, this is just what the scientific people found, and this
Yes.
is what I have some people doing. But a lot of people buy the 2X, which is the strongest version we sell. And that particular one, strangely enough, and this was really weird because we're in charge of the website and everything like that. So we see people ordering it and everything and making comments. But what I started to
Mm.
notice, and it was weird, 10% of the people buying it early on, somehow I got in some forum somewhere, were actual doctors. There's a
Oh,
DR in front of their name.
that's
And I
interesting.
got to talk to one of them. And he's, yeah, I'm a retired neurosurgeon and I have Parkinson's. And I'm
Wow.
like, whoa, dude. And then I just spoke to someone else last night and they also were involved in, I think, psychological things and things of that order, Dr. Weiss. But the point being, they had called me with some excitement that they said that they always walk down a nature trail with their partner and they held hands because that person would fall. And they said for the first time, after taking my product for about 3 months, they said, I let go of that hand and I made it halfway down that trail without holding that hand.
That's
And they were
remarkable.
like, wow, this is totally cool.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it takes 6 months, in my opinion, to a year
Yep.
to get this to work. So everything's a subscription base as much as we can do. Some people buy one time just to try it to make
Sure.
sure it works or
Have
the
a bad
flavor or
reaction.
whatever.
Yeah.
And then we allow that. That's fine. But they come back and become subscribers,
Yeah.
and that's their cheaper way to buy it. And we autofill and all that.
Sure.
But the interesting thing is that the early signs are showing me that from people taking it, they're getting results. The problem is that we ask them to make a log and you write down all the things you have now and then give a score to that every week and see if those numbers start to change.
Right.
Because I didn't notice it at first. When I kept taking this, you don't notice being normal. That sounds strange, but you don't notice not tripping over the rug
Yeah.
or not stumbling into something or bumping into
Right.
something. And I had to go backwards in time a little bit and go, wait a minute, I haven't bumped into something. I didn't trip. I didn't hurt myself recently.
Yeah.
So it was very subtle what was going
Yep.
on. And we don't want people to give it up just
Sure.
because they're,
They're not getting results.
yeah,
And so, do you recommend that people get any of these tests done to see where they're at and then,
if they
kind of do
can.
what you did as
Yeah,
far as,
I'm ornery.
yeah,
I don't take no for an answer, but I think it's good if they can, especially at least at this point. We can only say that the amyloid beta 4240 test is for Alzheimer's. NIH kind of hints that it could show other dementia. So there's a little,
oh, so it's really only designed for Alzheimer's, which must be a
at this
different
stage,
marker.
yeah, at this point. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of people have gotten in the game. So I got mine done through Quest Diagnostics. They were the first people I
I've heard
saw.
of that.
Yeah, Quest is out there. And at that time, they had what was called MyQuest, where you could go up and literally, without a doctor, order your own test. And then they had their own doctor online
Wow.
that would just approve it,
Yeah.
basically rubber stamped it. So that's how I got it. I paid out of pocket.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, my doctor was like, you already got it. I'm not going to reorder it, type of thing.
Right.
That seems to be a good marker, at least for the Alzheimer's part. But if you have Parkinson's, you're going to know your tremors are slowing down.
Exactly.
You're going to know that, like this person who just said what they said, that they're literally able to walk in a way they couldn't walk before. Another doctor I talked to that's taking it, he said he lifted weights and he could lift maybe 3, and that was about all he could do. He just couldn't get past that point. As he started taking, he said, I can do 10 reps now.
Wow.
So people are going to see it in different ways.
Right.
It's not like I could say this is definitively what you're going to experience.
Right.
You
And
just
so,
have to write down everything you have and say, did any of those elements get better?
the difference between a natural supplement versus a pharmaceutical, as far as testing goes, is there any way to do the gold standard double blind placebo type of test with a natural product like this?
The FDA regulates supplements as really no regulation.
Yeah.
And they're not like Germany's a way tougher country about supplements. As a matter of fact, shipping in there is really hard. And I literally, in the last couple, I would say this week, within the last 7 days, I've gotten people from Australia, the UK, Germany, all asking me to ship there.
Oh my
Holy
word.
cow.
That's incredible. So
And
word
I'm not
is
even set
spreading.
up for that kind of shipment.
Once you get on Amazon, though, they'll be able to ship it for you or no?
Possibly, yes, because Amazon does have a connection with a global shipping hub. And
Okay.
so it could be possible that could work out. Some
Yeah.
countries don't mind as much. I guess the UK, as long as it's for personal use, they're
Right.
okay. You can buy up to 3 months at one time. Australia's, you can buy up to 3 months at one time. Germany is, unless you go through a massive amount of their regulations, you're not going to get in there. So we would probably work with another provider in someplace like Germany and license out how we do things and have to work with them. But that all takes a lot of work, obviously, to do. Online, I read that one doctor said that Parkinson's is a pandemic at this point. You have so many silver tsunami retirees moving into that place, and you have so much chemical exposure all around the world. PPE is not the only chemical that's a
Right.
trigger.
Oh God, there's so many, I'm sure.
Exactly. So we're going to see a lot of it. It's not going to stop. We feel we have a huge amount of growth. We've been approached by a couple investors, but in the computer industry, I actually worked with investors before, and
Oh, wow.
got a lot of money with doing computer programming development and people
Yep.
wanting, we get huge stuff for big groups. And so I'm used to working with them, but
Sure.
no one's going to change the way the formula is, and no one's going to do that. So when they come in and say, maybe we could mass produce it this way, whatever, I'm like, no, you go
So
away.
are-
I want investors that understand we're not going to change it. We're going to make it better all the time. And the cost isn't a factor. We need as many people getting well as possible.
Exactly.
Period.
And so, being that you're going on Amazon, are you going to be able to keep up with the demand, do you think? Do you have enough sources of this fruit?
To be honest, so you bring up a point of why I haven't been on Amazon yet. Because there is one brain supplement product up there that does nothing what we do. It's
Yeah.
more for aging and things like that. It doesn't focus. It doesn't use the same ingredient we have. Nothing. They do
Yeah.
500,000 a month.
That's what I'm
Insane.
thinking, that this because it's already taking off without being on Amazon, you may have to ramp up pretty quick.
Yeah. And then again, we're talking to investors, but we'd rather have investors that were silent investors,
Right.
investors that would rather take a backseat, let us run it because we're already
Right.
doing well
Right.
and
And even
understand.
your mission as opposed to turning this into a big money-making
Yeah.
enterprise. Not that you don't want to make some money, of course.
No, you need to make a profit to
Of course.
obviously make all that happen and everything. But on the other hand, and I'll tell you, I've done this out of my own heart and I feel that way. I had a person who called me who they were taking care of their partner who had Parkinson's and they were buying the product. But then that person, the caregiver, got cancer and had to deal with the cancer and had a lot of expenses and
Yeah.
basically called me up and said, "Can you cancel my subscription? Because I'm really up against the wall." I said, "What's the problem?" And she told me, and I said, "Look,
Yeah.
where can we be comfortable with a number you're comfortable with?" And we came to an agreement and I still ship it to her. And she's
Oh,
so happy that she can take care of her husband that way.
yeah.
And I'm a business guy, but I'm also have a heart in this. Feel
Exactly.
that helping people get better, in this case, through a natural thing that has to be preserved in a certain way,
Yeah.
is as close to nature as possible, is important. And sometimes you just have to look at it that way. And I'm that kind of person who will do that. So we don't want people to not get it, but we're hoping that bigger groups get involved in it that can help support it better, or investors that maybe have a philanthropy sort of thinking to themselves. So we're not a
Right.
nonprofit.
Right.
So they'd have to understand they'd be part of an equity position in the company. But we want to make it as powerful as possible. So we'd love to have investors come in, and anybody listening here
Yeah.
wants to dive in. We do have a section in our website at mybrainrestore.com. Our phone number's there. We answer it 7 days a week, and we're not going to stop doing that. We have no AI that answers the phone. Leave a message. We'll call you back because we deal with a lot of people that are seniors and they want to talk to somebody.
Absolutely.
And my journey book is going to come out on Amazon also.
Oh,
So it
cool.
gets more into my life at Camp Lejeune and what happened, and a little bit more of analogies and how everything fits together. So I have a hard time finishing the book because things keep changing. I keep getting new stories all the time of people with success. And it's like, where do I stop writing?
Geez, that's incredible. Mark, wow. I'm so impressed at how you took what could have been a
A
totally
very
life-ending,
scientific,
life-altering,
right.
negative situation and totally turned it around. And now you're helping other people. And that
Yeah.
is just phenomenal.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much.
it.
All right.
Yeah,
I will be sure to have the link to your website in the show notes.
sure.
And yeah, this has been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What was the one moment that really shocked you in this episode? You can write just one comment below. And if this episode made you think of someone who's been dismissed or told nothing can change, please share it with them. I'll see you next week.